It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is David Birzon. David is the current CEO of Snooze, and his love for the food industry began back in 1991 when he started as an evening prep cook and baker at Paradise Bakery in Aspen, Colorado. After becoming a partner and spending 23 years at that company, they successfully sold it to Panera Bread back in 2007, and David stayed on for 4 years as a senior vice president at Panera. In 2011, he moved his family back to Colorado and took a look around for new opportunities and became CEO of Snooze in 2012. Under David's leadership, Snooze has grown to now operating over 35 restaurants across 5 states and has over 2,100 employees. David Birzon, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Yeah, no, wonderful to connect with you. And, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about planning the podcast, but we always like to kind of start with the early days. So tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Sure. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and I guess a normal middle-class family. My dad was an attorney and college professor at SUNY at Buffalo.
Right.
My mom was an artist, and my brother and I had one brother and one sister, and we lived in the city, so that was really interesting. Buffalo's the second largest city in New York State, so it was a lot of fun.
Middle child, top, down the bottom?
Middle child.
Middle child.
The well-adjusted one.
There you go.
As I like to joke with my siblings.
Tell me about some of the things that mom and dad taught you growing up. What specific inspirations or anything that might have influenced you in those early days?
I mean, more than anything, a work ethic. I mean, both my folks were really hard workers, and they expected the same from their kids. They placed a high value on education. And in my household, it wasn't where you're going to go to college. It was where you're going to go to grad school.
Right,
so that was kind of indelible in my brain from a young age. But, more than anything, I saw both my folks work quite a bit, and I always loved to work. And I started working as soon as I turned 15 years old.
Wow, awesome. What was that first job?
My first job was at a grocery store called Fresh Mart. And it was kind of in a lousy neighborhood. And I had one of the worst jobs. It should be in that television show, Worst Jobs, because I would come in. This was back in the day when grocery stores had their own butcher shops.
Oh, yeah.
And I would come in after school and I'd have to clean the meat room.
Oh,
because they were all union butchers, so they didn't do their own cleaning.
I bet that was a bit of a humbling experience, I imagine, even as a 15-year-old.
It was a humbling experience, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine. Who were some of the early influencers in your life? Anyone either at that job or perhaps a coach or a teacher that you remember from those early days?
Yeah, a bunch. Certainly my father, who, I respected just a boatload. The guy, I think our generation has a little different outlook, but, he was definitely of a generation where you work. I mean, he was typically out the door by 6:30 in the morning, and he'd come home just in time to kiss us and put us in bed at night.
Yeah.
And, I really picked up a lot from that. One of my very first managers, a guy named Paul that I worked with at Fresh Mart, who, no one had really, even though I wanted to work, no one had really taught me how to work.
Right.
And I remember after my first week cleaning the meat room, he sat down with me and said, "You're doing a lousy job." And and no one had ever said that to me before. And I was really just taken aback. And I asked him, what does it take to do a great job? And, I really did learn from him, the old adage that any job worth doing is a job worth doing well.
Right. Awesome. Mom was an artist. Was she also a college grad?
My mom was not a college grad. She actually went to college and then dropped out to follow my dad, which happened a lot back
Sure.
then. They
Sure.
got married in 1960. But brilliant woman, an amazing artist, sold textiles all over the world. So but also a hard worker. And she was not a housekeeper. I mean, she had us making our own beds, doing our own laundry, packing our own lunch from probably the time I was 9 years old.
Good skills to learn at an early age.
Yep.
Were you a good student in school, David?
I was an okay student. I like to think that the A students work for the C students, but anything that really piqued my interest, I loved, and I did really well in. And I got an A in physics because I loved the physics teacher and I loved what we were studying. Things I wasn't that interested in, like foreign languages, I didn't do that well. But I was always busy, and I was always highly involved in any organizations or groups that were at school, and kind of the same. And then once I got to college, I really settled down and became a serious student.
In those early days, what about outside of class? Sports, music, theater, anything you were involved with?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit of a band geek and played the trombone, did some theater. I ran a lot, so played baseball. So, pretty much everything. But I was always a great teammate sitting on the bench because I just was not that skilled an athlete.
Yeah, got it. What about entrepreneurial things? Were you, had the ubiquitous paper route? Did you, sell greeting cards at Christmas time or any of those types of things?
I definitely had a paper route. Yeah. I used to get in trouble at school a lot for selling gum and candy and things like that you weren't supposed
buy in bulk and repackage.
You weren't supposed to do, but I always just loved earning money. And as soon as I was 15 and went to work at Fresh Mart, I used to joke around that I was the richest guy in my high school. I mean, I was probably making $70 a week, and that was all the money in the world back then.
Nice. And what did you spend the money on? Was it a rainy day fund, or did you have some specific hobbies that you enjoyed?
I saved a little, but we'd go out. I could go out with my friends, go to the movies. I mean, back then, I could go out on a date for $20 for an entire evening. So the money went far.
Right. So you said that college was kind of a foregone conclusion. Dad had a master's?
My dad went to Columbia Law School.
Right. And you said you did some teaching as well. So was he kind of an adjunct at SUNY in Buffalo, or what was he? Yeah.
Yep. He was an adjunct professor there. Right. He taught there for 40-something years, a long time.
Wow. So going to college was a foregone conclusion. How did you decide where to go and what to study?
Well, I really never thought about going any place except University of Buffalo, where my dad taught. I went to school for free, except for having to buy my textbooks.
Nice.
I loved, I had a bunch of friends that were going there. And, I think I really realized that college is what I was going to make of it anyway. And I became very involved. I wrote for the student newspaper. I was in student government. I was president of my fraternity. I mean, you name it, I kind of got involved in it. So I had a great experience there.
Yeah. Awesome. And what was your degree in?
Business.
Business. Okay, cool. And then did you go on to get your master's degree as well?
I did. I went back and got my MBA.
And did you do that also in Buffalo?
Also at SUNY at Buffalo.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And so that first job out of college, did you work for a few years between getting your bachelor's and master's?
I did, but I was kind of a ski bum at that point. I had finished college, decided to move to Aspen, Colorado, and just take a year off. When I had graduated college, the collapse in the late '80s of the financial markets had happened, and I had a degree in finance, so no one was really hiring. So I thought I'd take a year off and go ski. I did that, and that's where I started working at Paradise Bakery. That was one of my jobs in 1989, and then I decided I was going to go back and go to law school and get my MBA. And I dropped out of law school at about the end of the first week.
Not a long-lived career there.
It was not for me, but
not for you.
It's funny. My one of the things I also got growing up from my dad was he had this belief that you just can't make it in life unless you're an attorney. And my sister was an attorney, and my brother went to law school.
Oh wow!
And I thought I needed to do it. And I remember sitting in a class, and it's just not my personality. I think the teacher was saying something like "the sky is blue," and another student was arguing with him that no, it can't possibly be blue. And I just said, I am not. This is so not me. And I went and resigned, and then went and told my father. But I did finish the MBA part.
Yeah, excellent. So how many years in between from the time that you graduated undergrad before you went back?
It was just a year.
Oh, okay. Got it. So that was out to Colorado and then back again.
You can only ski so long before you decide you gotta do something serious.
Awesome. So coming out of grad school then, what was that first job? Was that back at Paradise?
It was back at Paradise. I mean, I had never really worked in the food industry before Paradise Bakery, and I got to do so that year that I took off, and I became friendly with the two brothers that founded the business. And I really loved it. I mean, food, if you have an outgoing personality and you have a strong desire to serve, it's certainly not a nonprofit, but, if you really are a human being that loves to serve other individuals, and you also want to manage something big, I really got fulfilled doing that. And so I went back to grad school, but I really loved that business. I didn't know much about it from the business side at that point. And then as I was getting ready to finish up my MBA, the two founders of Paradise Bakery kept calling me and and they kept saying, come to work for us. I mean, you got to come back to work for us. The problem was, I think they were starting me at about $22,000. And I had a job offer at the time from a pretty big company, at about $50,000 a year, which was all the money, really all the money in the world back at that time.
Sure.
But I knew where my heart led, and I told the founders, I said, I'll come work for you if you'd consider making me a partner. And they said, work for us 1 year and prove yourself, and we'll make you a partner. And that's what I did.
Nice. So some equity came along with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. And did you have leadership responsibilities early on, David?
Oh yeah. I mean, I came in as an assistant manager, and then it was funny. The GM at the time, after about 6 months, he became my assistant manager, and I took his role. And, then I started supervising our second location there in the Valley. And then I think by the end of the first year, we were elected out of like 300 businesses, the best run business in the Valley.
Nice.
So, I moved up very quickly.
And that was in the Aspen area. So you got your hobby back as well.
I did. I got my hobby back a little bit, but I did work a lot.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And then when I finally did get my ownership, because I had proved myself, we started opening Paradise Bakeries in Texas. So I moved to Dallas, Texas. Wow. And we started opening there, and then eventually moved to Phoenix, where I lived for 17 years and grew to run that business.
Right. What were some of the earliest leadership lessons you got from, former bosses and mentors?
Gosh, the earliest one probably is it's very difficult to fire people. Everybody learns that right away, right?
That's right.
It's necessary, but
first time's the toughest.
It's brutal. As a matter of fact, this is a true story. So, in Aspen, pretty much everyone there is there to ski and pay their rent. And I had this kid working for me, this young man, and I knew he couldn't work for me. And I sat down with him and I let him go, and he started complaining, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. What am I going to do? And I said, hold on a minute. And I ran across the street to Banana Republic, and I got him a job as a stock boy.
Wow. That's service, huh?
that service. But that's just how bad I felt at the time. But I also learned that look, it's business and conversations with people.
Right.
Our business, hospitality business, is a people business. And in order to lead, you have to learn to deal with people. And that's a time-on sport. So I learned to never avoid the difficult conversations because they were always learning opportunities. And to really jump right in with both feet.
Right.
I also learned from my mentor, Dan Patterson, that you got to take the time to learn your craft. I was always itching to move up. When can I move up? I want to go from assistant manager to manager, manager to district manager, district to regional, regional vice president. And I just want to move up. And I remember early on, he said, look, you're all of, you have your master's degree. You're all of 23 years old. Take some time and really learn this business. So I did. I was a general manager of different restaurants for about 3 years. And what I learned, the foundational 3 years, and what I learned, the foundational to this day.
Yeah. Now, you came into a partnership with two brothers, I think you said, right?
Yep.
At Paradise.
Uh-huh.
Now, how did that go? Because that can be kind of a little tenuous, given that they're family and been together for a long time, and you kind of came in as the outside employee. Were there some rough patches along the way?
People are always amazed when I tell them this because partnerships are always known for some strife. But no, I was with those guys 20 years until we sold the business, and we had phenomenal relationships. Wow. We had a great time doing it. I think we all really focused on different facets of the business, but at the same time, they were older than I was. Danny was 20 years older than I was, it wasn't very competitive. And at that time, I was this young guy looking to make my first score, and they had just started raising young families, so I got to take on a great deal of responsibility at an early age.
Yeah, they were happy for you to spend that 15-hour days back to back, I'm sure, right?
Looking back on it, absolutely, but I'm not complaining.
Yeah, awesome. And with regards to, the moving around, did you start your family during that period, or did that come later after you kind of transitioned from Paradise?
I did. I met my wife in Dallas, Texas. When I was in Dallas for those few years. We moved to Phoenix in 1996, I believe, and our son was born in 97, daughter born in 99, and now they're both out of the house. So
Yeah. Gosh, those years go by fast. Well, was that a challenge, kind of the work-life balance and, knowing the restaurant industry, as you know, we work in search and do quite a bit of work in that industry. And I just know how dedicated the folks are. And, I've heard a lot of stories about how it's a struggle sometimes because you also have got a family at home. And, you remarked about how your dad, made sure he got home to kiss your brother and sister goodnight. Were you able to spend the kind of quality time with your family that you'd hoped to?
No, I absolutely didn't. But, you learn those lessons too late because you hear these things from everybody says the same thing, that those kids grow up fast. Yeah. But when they're young, you don't believe it because every day is a difficult one when you have a baby or a toddler, right?
You kind of hope they grow up faster at that time, right?
So it doesn't seem like they're growing up quickly.
Fast enough, yeah.
And I've always thought it'd be great to have kids at a later age because truly when you're in your late 20s or early 30s, you really are trying to make it in your career and you're putting in the long hours. And then you do wake up and realize, wow, I can't get that time back. So I actually here at Snooze, go out of my way to make sure people are not missing events at school. I'm constantly lecturing anyone that I see working too hard that, you've got to have that balance. Come in, get your work done, work hard, grow, but you can't get a school day back. You can't get, a missed baseball game back.
Yeah. Back to those earlier days when you first started managing people, what were some of the key challenges that you found you had?
We're in a people business, and we are in a business where great turnover. I still can't get my arms around this, and you're in the search industry, executive search, but I still laugh to this day when we'll report for our own business that we only had 60% turnover for the year, which is literally probably less than half of what our industry is known for.
That's very good for the industry.
We have 2,000 employees. So, that's 1,200 people that,
Right.
so someone still is, I've yet to understand how that is great. So,
Right.
we're constantly, so, I've learned that, look, this is a business about people and it always will be. And as I've risen through the ranks, here I am sitting at my desk talking to you at Snooze, and we've got this big office that we call the mothership, and 40-something people running around here, some at the C level, senior vice president level, VP level, and none of that matters because everything that we do happens at the restaurant level. It happens from the general managers and our staff that are serving our guests. So no matter what we do strategically here, it all comes down to how someone feels when they walk out the door after having eaten breakfast with us.
Right, right. So, what is it that you think at this stage, you kind of do differently maybe now than you did 15, 20 years ago when you first got started when it comes to the people at the front line?
Yeah, I mean, I still engage. I would like to think that it's the things I don't do differently that sets me apart. One of the challenges is the higher up you go and the more your responsibilities shift out of your core business, which is actually operating restaurants and serving guests.
Right.
You lose that focus and you tend to lose sight of what business are we really in, at least in our industry. That's certainly true. So I definitely try to get out to the restaurants. As a matter of fact, I was worried I was going to be late today because I was running back from one of our restaurants.
Right.
I make sure that at least once a quarter, I actually go in and work a full shift in one of our restaurants. I love to serve, and I'll take an entire section of tables and I'm the server for those lucky people, or as our staff likes to joke, unlucky people, because I don't do it often enough to be great at it, but I've got a lot of heart.
Good for you. Yeah, excellent. How would you say your leadership styles kind of evolved over time?
It's become much less intense.
Okay. More forgiving.
Much more forgiving, and nothing. Yeah. You do get to a point after I've been doing this 30-something years now. It's pretty rare that a new problem walks through the door, or something, an issue presents itself that hasn't presented itself before. And, you learn in those early days, you tend to be a little more passionate, emotional, a little more hot-headed in your decision-making. Things upset you, and very few things upset me nowadays. That being said, I really have never raised my voice. I learned that very early on from the founders of Paradise, that never raise your voice to anyone for any reason. And anytime you do, it's going to be worse for you. Right. And so, sure. I've never tended to be highly emotional. And, now I'm at a stage of my career where I really get to sit back and mentor others,
nice.
And, get to manage them. I still, my style of management is I always tell new people, I tend to micromanage you until I trust you and learn how you think. My dad was a law professor, the Socratic method, how you think is everything. So once I learn people's thought processes and really trust them, then I let go all the reins. And I think people have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Cool. Let's go back to your career a little bit. So, gosh, almost 25 years, I think, with Paradise, right? From going out and working as a prep cook, as we talked about in your overview, until, the business was sold to Panera, right? Successful in that transition. And you stayed on for a few years. So a couple of questions around that. So, was the desire to sell the business something that all three partners agreed with? And, was that something that you wanted to do in terms of the next step?
Well, it's actually
25 years, a good chunk of time.
It is. And it's actually kind of a funny story in that my partner, we were not for sale at the time. Panera Bread approached us with a really nice offer. And my partner, Danny, came to me and said, what do you want to do? And at that time, I was 40 years old and I was finally running Paradise Bakery, had risen to the top and was running the business. And I said, Dan, this is the kind of deal I want to do in 20 years when I'm 60.
Yeah.
And he looked at me.
They were in their 60s, right?
Yeah. He looked at me and said, yep. And he looked at me and said, the only problem with that is I'm going to be 80. And,
oh my gosh.
Look, I love these guys, and I said, got it done. And so we did it. And it was really the best thing that ever happened to me because, I spent the first
You stayed on.
I spent the first 20 years of my career in this entrepreneurial role.
Right,
and then I went to work for 4 years for a publicly traded company. And I've always said I've learned as much in that 4 years as I did in the previous 19.
Can imagine. How big were you at that 23-year juncture when Paradise was sold?
Oh, we had about 80 restaurants.
Wow, great. And then when you took over as an SVP there, I think, right? You were overseeing a big chunk of that business, or did you continue to manage those 80 locations?
Yeah, I stayed on as president of the Paradise Bakery brand, and then had some internal responsibilities at Panera. Right. So I learned a ton, but that being said, when my 4-year agreement was up, I knew I wanted to leave and go do something more entrepreneurial again, and really find a high culture business that I just loved. And
so you moved back to Colorado, right? From what I gather,
moved back to Colorado.
So were you looking around to start something, buy something? What was kind of your thinking?
Yes, I mean, really all of the above. I was looking to, either go in, find a private equity group and find a business to buy. I was looking to start something. But that being said, I've never considered myself an exceptionally creative restaurateur. I think I have a great palate. I think I have a great understanding of the business. I'm more of the guy that can come in and take a great idea and scale it.
Right.
So I really did. I spent a year and a half looking all around the United States for that next thing. And right at the time when I was the most frustrated that I'm never going to find that happy place again, or a place that I loved as much as I loved Paradise, I was introduced to Snooze, and I drove down someone told me about Snooze. I drove down the next day, visited, fell in love with it immediately, came down the next week, met with the founders, and we had done a deal within 4 or 5 months, and closed on the business, and we started growing it.
So how big were they at the time?
They'd just opened their 6th restaurant.
And now you're over 30 or close to 40, I think now, correct?
Yeah, we're getting ready to open in a couple weeks our number 38.
Fantastic. Congratulations. And across 5 states, and I think a couple of thousand employees.
Yep, we're getting ready to open up in Charlotte. Next year we'll go into Atlanta, Kansas City. So we're really starting to scale, but we've really put the foundation in place in order to do that, and we've got the right people.
Now, did you keep the founders on, or was it thank you very much, shake hands, and they went off their way?
No, you know what? It was actually the best scenario from any deal out there, in that I came into the business. They stayed about 3 months, and then they were again 2 brothers. Both the founders, 2 brothers. Kind of follow a theme in my career.
Some dynamics there,
and John and Adam. And after about 3 months, John announced that he was moving his family to Italy, and Adam announced he was moving his family to Australia. So I really had that opportunity a couple years then to really get in and run the business and learn it. But at the same time, a couple years later, they came back, and John's on our board. I just saw Adam a few minutes ago here in the mothership, and he's still involved in our sustainability and community efforts. So, and they're great guys, and I love having them around.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about company culture, because, in this situation scenario, there was a culture that was established, but, any CEO kind of does set the stage for what a culture evolves to. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about that, or doing things that either reinforce a cultural message or maybe help to establish one if there wasn't one there already?
Sure. I mean, we think about it all the time, and we talk it all the time about it all the time. And the first time I met the founders of Snooze, when I came down to Denver that week, the first question they asked when I was still getting out of my car in the parking lot, before we even sat down, they said, "Can you grow a business and keep the culture intact?" And I said, "Well, describe to me your culture," because Snooze has an incredible culture. Yeah. And they were kind of like, "Well, it's a little bit of this, and it's kind of like this, and it's kind of like this." And I said, "Look, guys, if you can't talk about it, you can't teach it. If you can't teach it, you can't scale it." So, it's not enough to have a great culture of just people. Great businesses also have to have a culture of discipline and a culture of execution. Right. So I really see that's
systems, huh?
Great processes and systems. And this way, everyone is always on the same page. And also, part of our processes and systems are, any decision that we put through the business, we think about how does that impact our people? How does that impact the touch points that are important to our culture. And, we don't make any decision without running them through that filter. A culture is not it's not a thing. It's a thing you do. It really is a verb.
Yeah.
So we work on it every day.
What would you say is most unusual or perhaps unique about Snooze?
For our industry, we really are disruptors. I mean, if you just visit Snooze, you notice it's not your grandparents' breakfast place. It is loud. It's a little bit irreverent. Our people are certainly as unique as you'd find anywhere in the industry. We basically allow people to be themselves, and we really celebrate individuality. And I'd always thought it odd. And look, I worked for Paradise Bakery and Panera, some pretty buttoned up businesses. And I always found it odd kind of coming into the second half of my career that, we always say that we hire people for personality, and then we say, put on these khaki pants, this polo shirt, and this name tag. So
conform,
right. Take your personality. So at Snooze, we really hire for personality, and then we try to preserve it. And, our employee manual or handbook literally says, have good hygiene, wear a clean Snooze t-shirt, and let your freak flag fly. And you can have tattoos, nose rings, purple hair, you name it. We really celebrate the individual, and we've got some amazingly cool people. But, I also say we don't have any servers that work for us. All of the people that work for us, they're artists and musicians and teachers and writers, and, they're really unique individuals that bring this amazing sense of caring and hospitality to our Snooze world.
I haven't had the opportunity to visit one yet, so I do hope so soon. So describe us a little bit. Is it a sit-down eatery, more of a diner type? Is it a Panera model? Is it serve yourself?
It's a full-service restaurant, and it's unlike anything you've seen before. The music's really loud. People always say, how do you know how loud just to turn up the music? And I always say, turn it up till the first person complains and leave it right there. That's exactly, that's the energy we want to create. We have a full bar, which is very unusual. It's not just mimosas, but we actually have a full bar that opens at 6:30 in the morning. And
my goodness.
And that creates a ton of energy. We also have a ton of every kind of coffee drink you can think of. And then it's really what's unique about the concept. It's all chef-driven, responsibly sourced food. So it's really the right food for how people are eating today. 30 years ago when the first TV shows, started featuring chefs and dinner houses became a big deal. And then that kind of transitioned into quick casual at lunch. Right. And now and we were actually the first restaurant to bring that to breakfast and apply those principles to breakfast. And if you want a Snooze experience, you have to go to Snooze. You can't, there's no one else doing what we're doing.
Yeah. Sounds awesome. Can't wait to visit. What would you say, you look for then when you're making the bets on the people you invest in? Whether it's at the server level or in your executive suite?
Yeah, we look for a desire to serve and a desire and innate sense of hospitality. We are in the hospitality business. You have to like people. You have to be outgoing. You have to have a great personality. There's no such thing to me as an introvert or a quiet person that works for us, because in order to be hospitable, you've got to put yourself out there. You need to greet people. You need to check on people. You have to truly connect with people. And when we do our consumer, our guest research, everything that comes back, which is really unique, is that there's really this desire. People come to Snooze because they like being a part of it. I mean, that's kind of, it really is more than a restaurant. It's a lifestyle brand. We kind of, our tagline is breakfast, but different. And we're different in all different ways. And I always find what's unique about Snooze is we live in this digitally connected world, and you walk into restaurants and everyone's on their cell phone all the time, and you walk into Snooze and people are actually talking with one another and having a great time and connecting, and phones are down on the table. And I love that. Yeah.
How do you personally interview and hire? I know you probably don't get much involved on the frontline folks, but for people that are either your direct reports or, in the corporate office or elsewhere, what are the kind of things you look for and ask about?
Sure. I spend the first 20 minutes of an interview or 30 minutes just looking for a culture fit, because that's an absolute gate. If you don't have the personality for us, if you don't believe what we believe and share those similar values, it's kind of a non-starter. It doesn't matter what your experience is. And then I usually really go into, especially here at the mothership, what is your skill set? What are your people skills? What are your beliefs about people? How do you bring that to the table? But, if for listeners that just want to go online and look at our, team member job application, if you fill out a job application from Snooze, we have some really interesting questions. Like, if you were a professional baseball player, what would be your walk-on song? We really celebrate individuality and are looking for someone that is more than an ubiquitous server out in the industry.
Right. Sounds like a very unique place. How do you decide if it's time to micromanage someone or stay out of the sandbox, so to speak?
Well, I mean, it's a lesson learned as you come up through the ranks that you can't do this all yourself, and you're not the smartest guy in the room. I always think that's the biggest mistake anyone can make, is to start believing they're the smartest person in the room. I've hired some amazing people around me at all levels, and they're professionals at what they do. So I have to learn to trust them. And I actually, from a leadership style, I allow people to make decisions. And oftentimes, if I'm debating, I always say to everyone, look, there's 10 ways to solve any problem. And our job is to find the one best way for Snooze, right?
Right.
It's true. If we're standing on the 10-yard line and trying to call plays, we can think of 10 plays to get there, but we've got to pick the one that works. And if I'm debating a play with someone and I don't agree with them, I will oftentimes let them call that play. I mean, it's their part of the business to run. And as long as it is a mistake, I think would not be detrimental in the long run for the business. Some of those mistakes are the best learning lessons anyone can ever have. I can only teach people so much, but when you make a great, big, juicy mistake, nothing makes you better as an individual.
That's right.
And as a leader.
That's right. Great philosophy. Well, David Birzon, CEO of Snooze, you've been very, very gracious with your time. Thank you. We do have one last question, which we ask all the CEOs. And, what type of career and life advice would you give to someone who, perhaps has their eyes on a corner office themselves, or perhaps, like you, runs their own restaurant someday?
Sure. I tell this to young people all the time. Pick what industry you want to be in and go work in that industry. If you're working at a grocery store, yet you have desires to be in the music producing business, go take a menial job in the music producing business. Quit wasting your time working at the grocery store. I mean, go get into the industry that you want to be in, because you will, I don't care how bad the job is, you'll meet people, you'll make contacts, and you'll learn. So you've got to start learning that craft.
Yeah, it's so important to be able to even just see if you like it, right? So many folks in a young age have those motivations. I always tell them, well, go check it out. Go see. You may find that it's not something you like, and it's better to learn that early on rather than build a career around getting somewhere that you end up not liking to be.
It's so true. I always tell people, just try something on for a while. It's like trying on a pair of pants. I mean, if you don't like it, you can return them or you can leave the job, but try it on, see how it feels, and see if it's something that makes you feel great and that fits really well.
Awesome advice. David, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Really had fun.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.